unbelievable that we could give a shiur and it could be heard mamish years and years and years later. It could be heard all over the world. Okay.
Well, I'll remember how well I get picked on him this year. It's pretty good.
They're already saying during your lifetime that people like you are extinct.
That I stinked?
Extinct. Marshall, Shelley had such a lovely time by you.
It was both ways. It was terrific.
I'm really very happy.
I love it.
I'm really very happy.
True that.
Yeah.
True that.
Yeah, really very happy for both of you. I love when the shiur becomes more and more of a family. Okay, bottom line, Nun Beis Amid Beis, Boi Minei Rav Kahana Mirav. Rav Kahana inquired from Rav. You know, we have a treifa called drusa. If a wolf claws a small animal, if a wolf claws a small animal, a lion claws a big animal, a hawk claws a small bird, a falcon claws a big bird. What about a cat? Yesh drusa l'chasel or ein drusa l'chasel? Is there treifa if you're clawed by a cat? Amalei af l'childa yesh drusa. Now, Rav is going to give three different answers. To this he said, what do you mean a cat? Even a weasel, there's a problem. Then they asked him, yesh drusa l'childa, is there a problem of the clawing of a weasel? Or yein drusa l'childa, or is there no problem? Amalei af l'chasel ein drusa. There isn't even a problem with a cat, which is bigger. Then they asked him, l'chasel l'childa yesh lem drusa, ein lem drusa. Is there a problem with a cat and a weasel or not? Amalei l'chasel yesh drusa. For a cat there is clawing. L'childa ein drusa. For a weasel there's no clawing. So this is a triple contradiction. So the Gemara explains that all three psakim, all three decisions, that's why you have to be so careful with psak, to know all the details that surrounds the psak. You have to be mamish very careful. The Gemara says, "V'loy kasha, hada amalei." That which he said, "Af l'childa yesh drusa," that even a small weasel, there's a problem with clawing. That's ba'ifus. That's with a bird. Hada amalei af l'chasel ein drusa. That even for a bigger cat, there's no clawing. That's be'imrei ravrave. That's with big sheep. Hada amalei l'chasel yesh drusa. That for a cat there is clawing. L'childa ein drusa, but for a weasel there isn't. That's begedia mutalam. That's by goats and sheep. Now, we said that there's clawing with a hawk. What about another predator? What about a vulture? What about other birds? By Rav Ashi, shar oifis tameim, other unclean birds, yesh lam drusa, ein lam drusa. Is there a problem with the clawing or not? Amalei Rav Hillel Rav Ashi ki avina bei Rav Kahana. When I was in the academy of Rav Kahana, Amar shar oifis tameim, yesh lam drusa. That even other birds, like a vulture, also have a problem of clawing. But the Gemara asks, "Va'anan tananu drusas haneitz ba'oifadak." Only the hawk by small birds. So that implies not other birds. So the Gemara says two answers. Drusas haneitz b'dekavosei. A hawk is even a problem for a bird the same size as it. The inach, other tamei birds, only b'dezutra only if they're smaller than it. V'ikidamrei drusas haneitz is b'deravim minai, in its class, even a bird bigger than it. V'inach and other tamei birds, only b'dekavosei, their own size. Now, what about a fox? You know, what made me think about that was looking at Marshall. So what about a fox? Amar Rav Kahana Mishmei Rav Shimi bar Ashi, Ein drusa l'shul. There's no clawing with a fox. A fox doesn't have anything in its claws. Says Gemara, and is that so? There was an incident that a fox clawed a ewe, that's a female sheep, b'merchat shel beis hinei, in the bathhouse of beis hinei. The incident came before the Chacham, v'amru yesh drusa, and they said that there's a problem of treifa. Rav Safra, you got the story wrong. It wasn't a fox, it was a cat. Ikid Amre, another version. Amar Rav Kana Mishmeid Rav Shimi Ba'ashi, yesh drusa l'shul. There is clawing by a fox. Any. Now we're going to report this story a different way. There was an incident that a fox clawed at a female sheep in the bathhouse of Beis Hinei, and they said that there's no problem. This is a third version of the story. First we said it was a fox, then we said it was a cat, and now we're saying that they said that it's not a problem. Rav Zafra, now a fourth version, Ha'u Kelevav, that was a dog, and we said there's no clawing by a dog. Now, let's get some halacha over here after we're getting so royally mixed up. Eddie looks like he's spinning. Amar Rav Yosef, Nakatinon, we have a tradition, Ein Drusa L'Kela. First of all, there's no clawing by a dog. Again, according to the Pshat, that all of this is bacterial, I'm not so sure why this should be, but maybe the dog doesn't do a lot with its paws. Okay. Amar Abaya naktinon ein drusa ela biyad, that the only clawing is with the foreleg. Lafuke regel deloy, not with the hind leg. Ein drusa ela b'tziporin. There's only, the venom is only in the nails, meaning that a bite doesn't have this venom. Lafuke shein deloy, it's not like a snake. Ein drusa ela midas. The problem is only if it's wanted to claw. If it inadvertently put its claw into an animal, there wouldn't be a problem. Again, this does not work out with the bacteria pshat. Because with the bacteria pshat, what's the difference if it was intentional or not intentional? It works with the pshat that there's venom, so venom is only secreted intentionally. Problem is that the Rishonim say, we don't find that there's venom in a wolf, and we don't find that there's venom in a lion. Again, so they propose over here, which happens sometimes in these Gemaras, that nishtanu ativim, that the nature's changed. Then the Gemara says something that seems to be superfluous. Ein drusa ela mechayim. It only is a problem if the animal is alive. Lafuke lachamisa, if the claw touched the other animal after it died, delay. So the Gemara says, well, duh. If it needs das, then it has to surely have to be alive. Imre hashta shalom das amrit lai. If we say that if it's unintentional, it's not, even when it's alive. Lachamisa mibai, obviously after it's dead, it's not intentional. So that seems to be a superfluous statement. Says the Gemara, like tzricha de doris, it stuck its claws in when it was alive, or paskua liyade, and then they cut off the paw of the wolf. So I would think, okay, it secreted its venom when it inserted the claw. So here the Gemara says the venom comes out when it pulls it out, and not when it puts it in. Again, this would not be good with the pshat of the bacteria. It won't work. Mao the same abadi the doris shadei ziare. It puts its poison in when it puts in the claw. Kamash malon badi the shalav shadei ziare. It comes out when it pulls it out, and since it was detached from the animal, there's no poison, and therefore there's no problem. Okay, so now we're going to get into the subject of suffik drusa, a doubtful drusa. Now, most of the times when it's a doubtful, it's a svek sveka. Suffik, so let's see. Amarav bar Avuna, Amarav. Ari shenichnas lebein hashvarim. If a lion entered amongst oxen, v'nimtza tziporin begaboy shel echad mehem, and you find the nail of a claw in one of the backs of the oxen. So do we have to worry that it was clawed and it was poisoned? Ein chayshishin shema ari darsei. It's interesting. We don't worry that it was clawed by a lion. My timer. Roiv aroy is darsim. The majority of lions claw. Umiyutan ein darsim. Some don't. But v'kol adores, but any lion that claws doesn't leave a nail in its victim. Ein tziparna nishmetis. V'zois hoyel v'tziparin yosheves loy b'gabay, since it has a nail in its back, eimer b'koisel nischachech. It must be that it was rubbing, animals like to rub against a wall, and in the wall was a nail, and the nail came from the wall. That doesn't have any poison. Says the Gemara, Adarabba, Rav Shvarim Mischachin. The majority of oxen rub in walls. Miyutim a Mischachin. Minority don't. They call them Mischachin, but when they rub in a wall, they don't get nails in them. Ain't tziparin yosheves loy b'gabay. They don't get nails. V'zeh ha'oil v'tziparin yosheves loy b'gabay. Since it has a nail in its back, Eimer ari darsei. We should say that the lion must have clawed it. So the Gemara says, you're right. You could say one way, and you could say the other way. Though therefore, uke milsa acher. What's a chazaka? The last known status. The last known status is that this animal wasn't clawed by a lion. So we leave it in that last presumptive status and say, Havale Suffolk Drusa, V'rav l'tamei damar ein chayshishin l'Suffolk Drusa. We're not worried about a doubtful case of clawing. Now, because we leave it at its presumptive status. Now, we're going to still add a few variables over here. Amar Abaya loy amran ela tziparin. That's only if it was a nail, because we say it's not usual that the nail should come off the lion. Aval makam tziparin, but if you see a nail mark, oh, then that must be that the lion clawed. That's normal. Then chayshishin. V'tziparin nami loy amran, and even if it's the nail, the only time we don't say it comes from the lion, ela lecha, it's only if it's fresh and moist, because it's not normal that it should come off the lion. Aval yavesha, but if it's a dried out nail, that could come off the lion when it claws. Of the mishtamta, and even v'leicha nami, and even if it's moist, we don't attribute it to the lion. Elachada, that's only if there's one nail. Aval tarte or tlas, but if there's 2 or 3 nails stuck in its back, we don't say it got 2 or 3 nails from rubbing against the wall. Chayshina, but that's only if the 3 nails are in the form of a paw. That's if it's in the form of a paw. If it's haphazardly around, then adrab, then it came from a wall. Itmar. So now we're going to see that there's a machloikis between Rav and Shmuel whether we're concerned about a case of doubtful clawing. And the Gemara is going to isolate what's the case that's considered a doubt. And we're going to learn on the end of today's daf that there is a way to check a drusa. There is a way to check the animal to see if the poison affected it. There is a way. Itmar, Rav Amar ein chayshishin l'safek drusa. We're not worried. If it's a doubt, we're not worried. V'shmuel Amar chayshishin l'safek drusa. We are worried. Now, the Gemara is going to narrow down the case where there's a doubt. The Kuli Alma, Suffolk Ol, Suffolk Loy Ol. There's a doubt whether the lion went into the corral or not. So that's a svek sveka. First of all, maybe it didn't go in, and if it went in, maybe it didn't claw. For a doubt of a doubt, we're not worried. So, Eima Loyal, there we say that we're not worried that it went in. Again, Suffolk Kalba, Suffolk Shunra. If it's a doubt whether it's a dog or a cat, remember we said the clawing of a dog is not a problem. So again, that's a svek sveka. Maybe it was a dog, and even if it was a cat, maybe it didn't claw. Eima Kalba. Ol Shasik ve'esa beinayu. If the lion went in but was quiet, and they were quiet, Eima Shama Shavik, then there's no reason to be concerned. Maybe they're domesticated and there's no problem. If it cut off the head of one of the oxen, so then we're not worried about the other ones, because it got out its rage on that ox. Nach meriske, it settled from its anger. You're not worried about it. Iu kamavoi, v'inu kamakarkarin. They're all making a racket. The lion is roaring. The animals are making a racket. No, then they're just scared of one another. Again, there's no reason to say there was a clawing. Key pligu, the argument between Rav and Shmuel, is the iukashach, the lion looks complacent, v'inu kamakarkarin, but the animals are in a tizzy. Mar Savar, so Shmuel holds that's a riot at Maisa Kovid. Shmuel holds that must mean that they got clawed. Mar Savar and Rav just says they're scared. Mach must be Susayu de Kovden. There's no reason to assume that they were clawed. Amar Ameimar rules l'chumra like Shmuel. We're afraid that the lion did claw it. Rav Ashi says, what are you doing with Rav? Rav's a great man. Hi to Rav Mai. Now this was a nice way of saying, he said, I didn't hear it. What he meant was, but respectfully, I don't hold of Rav's chumrah. The Ibayis Ema Hodebe Rav Legabe de Shmuel. Rav retracted to Shmuel's opinion. Da'u Kafa, I saw that there was a Torah comic that went around about this case. There's always a place for comics in Marshall's life. And Jay, it's very good to see you. Berish is here. 2 chasanas in the rain. What a day to have 2 chasanas. It's great to have Berish with us. What a dedicated Talmud. So, Dahu Sharkafa. Sharkafa is a big basket. The Suffolk Drusais. All of them, it seems to be that a hawk flew into them. And there's a suffix that they were clawed. And the Rishonim say there was too many of them to make it worth it to check them, to open them up and check them. To also the Kami de Rav. Now Rav says the suffix juice is okay. But instead of paskening that it's mutter, Shadrinu lekame de Shmuel, he sent them to Shmuel. Shmuel wanting to make sure that nobody would use them, Chankinu, choked them, Vishadinu Benara, and threw them in the river. In other words, he made sure that nobody would use them. Now, if Rav didn't retract, Rav should have ruled that they're mutter, because he holds Suffolk Jews as mutter. V'isol g'dayt loy hodebe l'shvinu. Elamai hodebe, he retracted, and why do you have to send it to Shmuel? Let him answer it himself. Rav was a big paisik. L'shvinu, says the Gemara, it was in the place of Shmuel. And you don't paskin in someone else's place. Ella asrei de Shmuel hab. So now the Gemara says the details of the story need explanation. Lama li lemichnikinu. Why did he have to choke them? Lishdinu hachi benara. Let him throw him in the river. Says Gemara, he was afraid they wouldn't drown. He was afraid that mefarchan they would fly away v'solken. And it would go to Leiby, and Leiby would eat it. He wouldn't know that it was a Suffolk Drusa. But if it lives 12 months, you could eat it. Right? So let Marshall keep it around. Marshall's house is anyway a racket. So let him keep the basket around for 12 months.
My house is for the birds.
Right. That's what I meant. Says the Gemara, no, because asibuludei takala. Because if he keeps it around for 12 months, he might forget and make a barbecue. It's dangerous. So sell it to Tony. Well, they have to drown them, sell it to Tony. Says, we're worried that Tony will sell it to Eddie. Tony is one of Eddie's bookies. Also, Lizvinu Yisrael. Says the Gemara, let him choke it and throw it into the dump. Why does he have to go to the river? He's choking it. Well, nothing more could happen. Says the Gemara, let him throw it to the dogs. He wanted to let everybody know that a suffix juice is also.
That's the real reason why he didn't sell it to a guy.
No, that's the second reason. That doesn't have to be the real reason. He wouldn't sell it to a guy because the guy could sell it to a yid.
Right, so if he killed it, then sold it to the guy, then the yid is not going to buy a killed animal.
No, it seems to be that killed birds aren't worth selling to a guy.
Okay.
Yeah. No market for killed birds. Hahu bar Avza. There was a duck. Dahavei Ravashi. Duck already, duck. Duck is a davar chashiv. I used to buy always on Yom Tov. I used to buy duck. Saba remembers there was a store, Kosher Island, and they would prepare me a delicious duck. Leiby remembers growing up, I would order a duck for Yom Tov. I remember my shver, this is going back 35 years ago, 36 years ago. My shver says, duck wasn't chashiv. In Europe, a gestupte Gans was chashiv. A duck wasn't so chashiv. But anyway.
There's not a lot of meat on a duck, is there?
No, there isn't. There isn't. We didn't only get duck, but that was like a taste of chashivas,
Sometimes I tell my youngsters, I forgot I used to bring you a duck.
Yes, I didn't forget.
In Israel, they used to fatten up geese.
That's a gestupte Gans. That's called the gestupte Gans. So anyway, now that we got the duck story down to a science, my mother has a duck story. She went to a restaurant and in Eretz Yisrael they gave her a piece of duck and there was hardly any meat on it. It's another duck story. But anyway, so now we're going to have another duck story. And I should welcome in Dr. Guy, Mel Zachter, Shalom Fogel, Yaakov Warman, Marshall Castle, Irving Fishbaum, Eddie Chazan, Baruch Ian, Leiby Vego, Ruvain Pollack, Saba, Nachman Chapler, Berish Gessman, Jay Siegel, Yitzi Muller, Rabbi Kranz, Gedalia Engel, Menachem Yemansky, Stephen Holtzman, Motorola, Avram Zepkowitz, Shimon Klein, Gabriel Epstein, Shelley Zeitlin, Moshe Lehman, Ilya Shutman, and David Helfgott. Here in Shul we have Michal Avram, we have Danny Vogel, Iran, we have Ruvain Shanet, braving the storm. Now,
Right, can you mention for Il Nishmas, my wife's father, Falak ben Herzka, please? Thank you.
we learn for Falak ben Herzka, his neshama should have an aliyah. So Ahu bar Abza, there was a duck, Dahavei Ravashi, that was in the academy of Ravashi. Ol lebeinei kanya, it wandered amongst the reeds. Reeds could be very sharp. Nafik asa ki memasmes kuei dama. It came out with its neck bloody. Amar of Ashi, loy amrinan, didn't we say safek kalba, safek shumra, ema kalba? If it's a suffix, whether it's a dog or a cat, we say it's a dog. Hachanami, safek kanya, safek shunra. If it's a doubt whether it's a reed or a cat, Eimer Kanya Machia, it was from a reed, there's no venom, and it's not a drusa. Imre b'nei Reb Chia. Now this is very interesting. The Rishonim say, why were they called b'nei Reb Chia? Rishonim say that they were not bar mitzvah yet. They were child prodigies. And they were quoted in the Gemara. Imagine, quoted in the Gemara for all time. They weren't even bar mitzvah yet. Even in our time, Reb Chaim Kanievsky made a Siyam Hashas with some of his children before their bar mitzvah. Amrei b'nei Reb Chia. Drusa she'amru tzricha bedika. If it was clawed, you need to check it keneged b'nei ma'ayin. Against the entire intestines. Amr Reb Yosef had b'nei Reb Chia kfar Pirsha Shmuel was already proclaimed by Shmuel. Amr Shmuel mishum Reb Chanina ben Antignus Drusha she'amru, where it's clawed tzricha bedika keneged b'nei ma'ayin. Boy Ilfa, who was a great colleague of Reb Yochanan. Gemara tells us that when Reb Yochanan went to learn, Ilfa went to work, but he used to hang himself from a very, very high place and say that if anybody asked him something and he can't show a corresponding Mishnah, he would throw himself to the ground. He was a great bucky. Boy Ilfa yesh drusel l'simanim or ain't drusel l'simanim. If you remember, we said that by nefula, where the animal fell, we don't have to worry about the simanim because the simanim are tough. And we don't have to worry about concussed simanim. What about clawing by the simanim? Rabbi Zeira Hadabai Ilfa Kfar Pirsha Rav Chanan bar Rava was already explained by Rav Chanan bar Rava. Rav Chanan bar Rava Amar Rav Drusa she'amru, when an animal is clawed, tzricha bedika keneged beis chalchal kula, you have to check the entire trunk of the animal. Va'afilu b'simanim, even the trachea and the windpipe needs bedika. Whoa, the battery is low. I didn't plug it in. My wife took the computer and I didn't plug it in. And before I lose everybody, let me plug in the computer. An easy way to lose a share. Okay, wow. That was a catch. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so now, Boy Elfa, Simonim Shinidaldu. Now this is something we talked about a long time ago in the beginning of the parak. Simonim that are in several places uprooted from their moorings. Bekama. When does it become a treifa? Amr Reb Zeira had the boy Ilfa Kfar Pirsha Rabba Barbachana. The Amr Rabba Barbachana Amr Shmuel Simonim Shinidaldu. If it's uprooted from its moorings, beruban, in the majority. Now you remember we said that's only if it's in many different places. If it's peeled, but it's attached hard in one place, it's still good. Boy Rabbi Ami, Himas Misa Mahu. What about if the flesh is decayed? You check it, and you see decay and rotten flesh. Amr Reb Zeira had the boy Reb Ami, that which Reb Ami inquired about. Kfar Pirsha Reb Yehuda was already explained by Reb Yehuda. Amr Reb Yehuda Amar Rav Vidrusa. Clawing is a problem at Sheyedam Basar Keneged B'nei Mayim. It's a problem if you see the reddening of the flesh opposite the intestines. Nismas meis habasar, but if the flesh is decaying, then it depends if that flesh is vital. Then we view it as if the flesh is removed. If the animal could live with that flesh being removed, then the decay is not a problem. If the doctor scrapes it away and leaves the healthy flesh and it could live, then it's not a problem. The Gemara gives us an example where this would be a problem. Amar Rav Ashi, Ki Avinam Bei Rav Kahana, when I was in the academy of Kahana, Aisu Kamana Hi Reya, they brought before us along the Chiave Meisva Lo Yosva Shaper. When the animal's lying, it was fine. But V'chiave Midlula, when they lifted it up, it would fall to pieces. Havi Tolcha V'nofla Tilcha Tilche. It would fall to little pieces. So that means there was decay, and since the lung is vital, and therefore V'tarif Nalam Rav Huna B'rei Rav Yeshua. Now, what about a thorn? Rav Nachman Aimer b'kaitz achetinokev l'chalal. It's only a problem until it punctures all the way to the trunk of the animal. B'drusa mishiyadim basar keneged b'nei ma'ayin. By clawing, it's when the meat is red opposite the intestines. Rav Zvid Masnei Hachi b'drusa mishiyadim basar keneged b'nei ma'ayin. Now, what about the food pipe and the windpipe? There, they itself have to be read. B'simonim achi yadimu simonim atzma. Wow, another daf of a lot of information. As we thank Sham Fogel for sponsoring the Shir Lili Nishmas Yaakov Zeb ben Yudaya, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Sivya Miriam Bas Gadri, Yosef ben Tzion ben Yaakov Zev. We learned the full shalom from Moshe ben Miriam for schus of a great shidduch for Chayet Tzivi Bas Shoshana Gittel, a great shidduch for Bati Basar. By the way, I believe that our Chaver Adas, A.B. Spry, is making tonight a wedding of an Einikel. It should be a mazel tov for him. A shout out to him if he's listening to the daf later on. A mazel tov to Eddie Chazan on the bris of an Einikel Roi. It should be Zaychik Hashem Shenichlas Bris. Ken Yikonas L'Torah L'Chipul L'Masim Tovim by Mark Frankel L'Nishmas Ilana Chana by Asir Yosef Avram. A shout out to Mark that we're missing you. And by Menachem Yemansky, that he and all those that are waiting for shidduch should find their shidduch quickly and easily. By Ed Saleh, L'Refuah Shalema for Yosef Shmuel ben Miriam. Again, Rabbi Isai, I have not yet received a sponsor for this week's Chumash here, Chukas. So if you're interested in sponsoring out there in our Torah world, 718-916-3100. That's 718-916-3100, 360 to sponsor, 540 to be a diamond sponsor. rmmwsi@aol.com, Rameshmei Staten Island at AOL.com. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful evening.